was first posted by von der Schoolberg at the Intercultural Urbanism blog in April 2016, sparking debate there about the design and wording choices made in the infographic. Routelai revives the infographic and presents additional history as background for the movements described in the infographic. Click through to see the graphics that support this narrative of the history of urban planning, the Oli map, Garden City, the setback principle, Broadacre City, Radiant City, psychogeography, the megaregio, the transect. Planning has been around for as long as cities have existed, but the 20th century saw a number of bold ideas that radically changed the makeup of our urban centers. From garden cities to psychogeography, today's infographic by Kostati von der Schoolberg is an informative overview of the modern movements and ideas that shaped urban planning. Managing housing markets, transport networks, river basins, energy supplies and investment in skills requires coordination across multiple local governments. The solution is strategic planning. The Royal Town Planning Institute, RTPI, a leading body for spatial, sustainable and inclusive planning and the largest planning institute in Europe, has studied how planning has worked in a number of settings and identified the following principles that strategic planning should follow. Irrespective of location. The evolution of urban planning. Urban planning has changed a lot over the centuries. Early city layouts revolved around key elements such as prominent buildings, e.g. cathedrals, monuments, and fortification, e.g. city walls, castles. As cities grew larger, they also became more unpleasant. Here are some key ideas from architects and planners who sought to tame the unruly urban beast. Garden City. At the dawn of the 20th century, cities were experiencing big population growth. The Garden City concept, devised by the English planner Ebenezer Howard, sought to solve urban overcrowding and poor quality of life by creating smaller, master-planned communities on the outskirts of the larger city. The city would be structured around concentric circles of land use and include a sizable park and green belt. Green belts were a revolutionary idea at the time and are still widely appreciated to this day. Setback principle. Early 1900s Manhattan had a population density of nearly 600 people per hectare and the skyscraper boom was in full swing. As buildings grew taller, the already crowded city was becoming a dark and claustrophobic place. To combat this, New York enacted the first citywide zoning code ever in the U.S. to help preserve some daylight on city streets. Setbacks had an immediate and lasting impact on Manhattan's skyline, as seen today in landmarks such as the Empire State and Chrysler Buildings. Broadacre City. If there is a true antithesis for today's urbanism, then the suburban brainchild of Frank Lloyd Wright is surely it. Broadacre City was a thought experiment that envisioned decentralized communities that would sprawl across a lush, bucolic landscape. That vision stood in stark contrast to frenetic, exhaust-choked cities of the 1940s, which resembled fibrous tumors, according to Wright. Though Broadacre City was never built verbatim, Wright's rejection of the American city came to life in the form of suburbs and strip malls from sea to shining sea. La site reduce. In the wake of World War II, France was searching for solutions to house its population. Nearly 20% of all French buildings were either destroyed or seriously damaged, and world-renowned architect, Le Corbusier, was one of the architects selected by the French government to construct new high-density housing. When Lane Site Reduce, Radiant City, was completed in 1952, it kicked off a media frenzy. Indeed, Le Corbusier is credited with pioneering the Modernist style of architecture that became wildly popular around the world during that time. While Le Corbusier's thoughtful residential buildings have stood the test of time, not all projects inspired by the style shared the same fate. For example, when governments in Europe and the United States looked to provide cheap, high-density housing to low-income families, the stark tower blocks they built often had the unintentional effect of ghettoizing their inhabitants. The megaregio. As cities within close proximity grow and merge together, finding a way to make them work as a connected economic and social unit is a key strategy for becoming more competitive on the global stage. Jean Gottmer, a French geographer, recognized this megaregio trend early on in the northeast region of the United States. His seminal 1961 study, Megalopolis, the urbanized northeastern seaboard of the United States, outlined the extraordinary dynamics that shaped America's largest urban corridor. Next stop, smart cities. In the era of big data, the future of our physical spaces may be defined more by bytes than bricks. City governments have been collecting big-picture data for planning in transportation and zoning for some time, but new technology allows for the capture of even more granular data. Cities can now measure everything from noise pollution to wastewater volume, and this can have a big impact on spending efficiency and overall quality of urban spaces. It's almost like a Fitbit for the city. Stuart Cohen, Chief Scientist, Smart Cities Council. A prominent section of waterfront in Toronto, Canada, is about to become a testing ground for this concept. The partnership between a government agency and Sidewalk Labs, a division of Alphabet, will produce an urban district that fully integrates technology and data collection into its design. If the project is successful, it may influence the way future smart neighborhoods are constructed. Be sharply focused. Planning should be about efficiently using resources and have a clear purpose. It is easy for strategic plans to become unwieldy and cover a wide range of issues that are adequately addressed either by regional or national planning policy, e.g. Scottish planning policy and England's national planning policy. It is not entirely clear why strategic plans need to include broad policy statements like all development will seek to mitigate climate change, especially if this objective is covered by legal and national policy provisions. Be genuinely strategic. Planning should deal only with issues that require treatment at a level higher than individual municipalities. Strategic plans need to set out where major investments in housing, transport and economic growth will take place. Decisions taken at the right geographic level will ensure appropriate investments, environmental safeguards and a degree of fairness between localities. Be spatial. Planning should make choices between places, not simply establish general criteria for later decision-making. All policymakers, not just planners, must recognize that some activities, for example, large-scale housing, employment and higher education, are better undertaken in some places within a city, county or region than others, and act accordingly. Be collaborative. Partners must work together to deliver each other's agendas, and collaborative governance structures can ensure proactive engagement by all stakeholders. This contrasts with what might be termed cooperation, where participation is restricted to proposal consent as long as it does not interfere with respective agendas. Evidence from England has demonstrated the value of allowing areas to determine their own associations. There are also strong advantages to permitting strategic planning collaborations to determine their own internal governance arrangements, subject to compliance with issues such as accounting practice. Have strong leadership. To ensure negotiations between places are productive and not protracted, the leadership must be both political and professional. Participants must have the full support of their areas when entering into negotiations, or they will be hampered. To reach that position, trust in the leadership needs to take root and flourish. Be accountable to local electorates. The process should ensure that governance arrangements are sensitive to the interests of local culture and communities. A common approach is to have a joint board comprising elected representatives of each area dedicated to strategic planning. Another is for a leaders' board to take strategic decisions. The latter has the advantage of facilitating closer links between spatial planning and other objectives. Be responsive. Strategic planning needs to be efficient, with a dynamic review mechanism capable of adapting to change. In several cases, the strategic planning function acts as a guide to other decisions, for example, on planning or investment, taken further down the line. If the plan is cumbersome to prepare, it could delay those other decisions. Be deliverable. For strategic planning to be effective, it must be linked to expenditure programs. From the experiences of Glasgow and London, it is clear that strategic planning only in name serves no purpose. Implementation bodies must also buy into the process. The RTPI has explored this critical factor in its Planning Horizons paper, Making Better Decisions for Places. Furthermore, RTPI has identified 6 key factors affecting successful strategic planning. 1. Cooperation between local authorities brings major benefits to all participating councils. 2. Strategic planning benefits from being locally designed. The principle of subsidiarity. 3. Strategic planning may flounder if the scope is insufficiently wide. 4. Effective strategic planning requires deep political involvement. 5. While business engagement may be elusive, it is critical. 6. Cooperation needs to reach beyond the core strategic planning area. This case study is a summarized section. Form strategic planning, effective cooperation for planning across boundaries, from the Royal Town Planning Institute, RTPI.